Hey guys, Wyatt Claypool here. As Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and the federal Liberals fall further and further into political irrelevancy, they keep becoming more desperate to get an attack angle on the Conservatives. And this latest one they tried out yesterday in the wake of Pierre Poilievre's second performance on Dr. Jordan Peterson's podcast is not only pathetic, it's really gross when you think about it. The Liberals are complete goblins on the issue of abortion. They're not pro choice, they don't like life, which is why they all literally voted against a conservative bill to have upgraded sentencing for criminals who murder and assault pregnant women. You think that's a no brainer, but that gives too much dignity to the life of an unborn child, so they couldn't vote for it. And now, because Poilievre went on this podcast and the podcast was sponsored by a pro life group, the Liberals thought this was an amazing attack vector, despite the fact that it actually makes them seem like horrible people, which is not an unfair takeaway after you see what they're complaining about here. So the Liberals posted this on their own official social media page. This is not like some random Liberal staffer. This is literally the Liberal Party of Canada's X account. They say, Pierre Poilievre just went on a podcast sponsored by an anti-abortion group. New Year, same anti-choice conservatives. And they have the post of Dr. Jordan B. Peterson's podcast talking to Pierre Poilievre. And below his initial posting of the podcast, there is this. Today's sponsor, Balance of Nature, get 35% off. So there's a little Balance of Nature thing. But then they also have it being sponsored by Preborn. Help save 11,000 babies from abortion. Do you know what Preborn does? This is where the Liberals, again, are complete goblins. Preborn is a crisis pregnancy center supporting charity. They take in money and sponsor crisis pregnancy centers. I'm not sure if they run them themselves, but at the very least, they basically help crisis pregnancy centers, whether they're theirs or it's somebody else's, in order so that they are stocked up with resources to provide for pregnant women who might be struggling to be able to pay for all the resources they need to be able to care for their child. So yes, they try and convince women not to have abortions, but part of the convincing is, hey, we will help buy all the formula you need, diapers, all that sort of thing. We will provide you any other support that you need, and we will even give you adoption services if that is an option you want. This is considered too pro-life for the Liberal Party of Canada. Again, you don't even have to be like hardcore pro-life to realize that this is really gross. And it coincides with the Liberals' ongoing plan to try and take away the charitable status of crisis pregnancy centers in Canada because they have the audacity to not offer abortions. It's almost like it's in their business model to not do that. But the federal government is saying that they're tricking people by offering the services that they offer, in which people walk in, can see what they do, and choose whether or not to take the services. But apparently, in the sick minds of Trudeau and his Liberal government, that the crisis pregnancy center must have on all the marquee that we do not provide abortions or they will lose their charitable status. Really, they just want to take away the charitable status and they will find some other angle to hit these institutions on if they can. By the way, aren't we in a population crisis? Don't we have a problem with not enough people for the workforce to fill the tax shortage we're going to have as more boomers and Gen X people start to retire? Wasn't that a problem? Apparently not, because anything pro-life, even if you're just supporting pregnant women, that is unacceptable to the Liberals. Check this out. I think it's very telling just how badly they end up getting ratioed on this. 2,900 comments on a post about abortion, about life issues, which is usually difficult to do because I find conservatives tend to run away from these sorts of things, unjustly so. This is an easy thing to win on as conservatives in Canada because the Liberals are so overextended on this issue. You just have to be like, maybe we should not have sex selective abortion. Maybe. And the Liberals, what argument do they make against that? But my comment here was that they're goblins, and it's disgraceful and sickening that they use this as an attack vector. But now I want to show you something else. Did you guys know that Justin Trudeau is actually not pro-abortion? Here's a tweet from him back in 2011 when he was getting into Liberal Party politics. He was running, I believe, in the 2011 election. He wasn't the leader yet, but he says, Now I'm getting guff from the other side because I said I don't like abortion. Does anyone who's pro-choice as I am really like abortion? Well, maybe not back in 2011 when Justin Trudeau was first elected, but apparently so now. They like abortion because they dislike people who don't promote it, which is the point of a crisis pregnancy center. Crisis pregnancy centers are also a liberal narrative destroying entity because what they are is supporting people after they're born, which destroys the liberal narrative that conservatives only care if the child is born, and then they don't care what happens to the child, which is a very weak argument if your argument is to then eliminate the child, but whatever. But conservatives, through things like crisis pregnancy centers, obviously do support women, like support mothers and children. And so that's why they hate them, really. I want to get into some other stuff here about this podcast. That's it on the liberal side of things. I just wanted to find another post here to show you guys, to demonstrate just how many people are really getting their brains broken by this podcast. And I thought that this guy right here that we're about to talk about, Guy Filicella, I don't even know how to pronounce his name. That's one criticism that people have of me that is totally fair. I'm terrible pronouncing people's names. But first, I want to show you a clip, and then I want to show you what the hardcore left is freaking out about from this Jordan Peterson interview. Here's Pierre Poilievre talking about crime and, immigration and whatnot.
And by the way, put aside race, this obsession with race.
Or I think this specific segment's about like how wokeism has destroyed institutions.
That wokeism has reinserted.
Invented
in many ways.
When I moved to Toronto, it was as race blind as any country, as any city could be.
Right.
And that's flipped. And it's flipped because of that obsessive concern with race. Right. That was something we 100% did not need in Canada.
No.
Right. We basically, what would you say, imported and invented racism in Canada. Right. As a consequence of policy.
Wokeism seeks to divide people into these different groups and subgroups, and we see the results in a 250% increase in hate crimes. But we're going to get back to the basic principle that people are judged based on their individual character and humanity rather than by their group identity. And that is actually, ironically, the most unifying thing we can do to bring our country back together, and as Lincoln put it, to bind up the nation's wounds.
Okay, great clip. Also, again, if you still haven't seen this interview, go watch it. I think it's fantastic. Pierre Poilievre, his real art form is the long form interview, although he likes using slogans. Like I said in the last video I put out, or one of my last videos, I put out my little random video with Brittany as my last video, but the previous one where it was just me alone, I was talking about how I don't mind Poilievre's slogans, but I think he actually needs to lean more into the long form podcast. He is very good long form. He talks very articulately in the long form, unlike Jagmeet Singh and Pierre Poilievre. Jagmeet Singh and Justin Trudeau. But what could somebody, how could you have a problem with anything he said there? Well, the guy Filicella here is going to have a problem with it. Guy is a drug activist. That's all I can really define him as. Big safe supply guy. He will twist any statistic in order to find some angle to where giving addicts even more drugs is actually very good for them. He says, programs like this saved me from the streets, even though he was saved from the streets back in like the early 2010s or 2000s, in which there wasn't like fentanyl and really extreme hard drugs on the streets. But anyways, he says Canadians are being conned by Pierre Poilievre, and it's heartbreaking to see. Here's his thread, guys. He says, what jumps out most to me about this interview he did with fawning right-wing extremist Jordan Peterson. They clearly lay out the way they're stirring up rage with carefully calculated campaign slogans, and then capitalize on people's anger over it, especially young men's. Pierre says before every speaking engagement, his team analyzes mainstream, ethnic, and independent media, downloads all the local social commentary, and then derides what the topic of the day will be based on what people are mad about. Sorry, how is that bad? He's trying to characterize it badly, but what he is saying is that before Poilievre goes to a speaking engagement, His team makes sure to read up on local issues so that he knows what people in that area care about. It's the opposite of what politicians like Justin Trudeau or Jagmeet Singh or Aaron O'Toole do, where they would show up to a place and they would tell you what they want to talk about, and they wouldn't ever touch on what the average person actually cares about. But moving on from here, he says, take this response here on racism and his claim of 250% increase in hate crimes due to wokeism, which is absolutely true. When you make it okay for some people to be racist, but not other people, obviously being racist is wrong in general, that will increase hate crimes. But he is taking issue with his 250% increase in hate crimes. He says every single part of that statement is false. According to Public Safety Canada, hate crimes rose 7% in 2022 after a bigger increase, 72% from 2019 to 2021. Guy, are you brain dead? Just asking. Not to be too insulting here, but did you just say a 72% increase between 2019 and 2021? That's massive. Trudeau has been in power since 2015, by the way, and we've had crime going up. I literally did my master's research paper on crime in the city of Toronto, in which I overviewed all crime in Canada for part of it. Crime literally every year of Justin Trudeau's, or at least basically since the start to the end, over each 3-year period, because sometimes it goes down a little bit year to year, but it will go back up. Crime's been going up throughout his entire time as prime minister. It's been really bad. So with a 72% increase that he just admitted to just between 2019 and 2021, and then another 7% increase on top of that in 2022, do you not think we've probably reached 250%? We had October 7th in Israel in 2023, where anti-Semitic hate crimes spiked everywhere. We've been having churches getting burned down all over the place in midway through 2022 and into 23 and 24. Do you not think there might be some extra hate crimes? When you add all of them up since 2015, do you really doubt, when we already know between a 2-year period we had a 72% increase, that we don't have a 250% increase since 2015? He doesn't know. The people who are in left-wing activism don't know how to read statistics very well. They'll just pull a statistic and say, it's only up 7% in 2022. Well, it's also up 72% in 2019 to 21. Compound them. It's crazy how high it is if you actually bother compounding this stuff. He's just sitting there being like, well, it's 72 wasn't as big as 250. That means it hasn't reached 250. It compounds. My goodness. Anyways, he says, but it wasn't wokeism that caused those increases. It was anti-Asian hate over blame for the pandemic, when outrage over racially motivated policing and backlash to the outrage. Now it's rising again because of the October 7th attack on Israel and the war in the Middle East. So he's admitting that it's also spiked after 2023. It's also a myth that there was a lot of anti-Asian racism in 2020, like basically during the pandemic period. Was there some? Yes, and it was usually wokeism that fueled it, because wokeism has made people very identitarian. It means that if you are, black or you are brown, then you have group privileges over other people because you are considered more oppressed than Asian people. So if you feel hard done by an Asian person, you are then given this disgusting social license to attack them. Not really, but the theory of wokeism would say that that's true, and that's why in places like New York City, you had skyrocketing rates of violence where usually African Americans would go and beat up Asian people. It wasn't a bunch of white nationalists running around and doing it, disgusting people, but they usually live out in rural areas. It was usually other minority communities attacking Asian groups. But again, that also wasn't nearly as big as the rise in anti-Semitic hate crime, which was still going up since 2019, way more than the anti-Asian stuff. But he's basically just using media narratives to explain away Pierre Poilievre's perfectly factual point. He says, no one invented or imported racism. It was already here. Oh, yes, here. He's going to argue against the idea of wokeism while he's extremely woke that our country's been racist through and through for decades. And these fake claims about wokeism and identity politics make it worse. They have made it okay to punch down on minority groups. There is your increase in hate crime. Okay, guys, people being jerks on social media is not hate crime. We're talking about actual crimes motivated by hate. even then, I'm actually kind of okay with just getting rid of hate crime designations altogether, because we should just be focused on locking up criminals rather than investigating whether it was like a higher level of hate. But here's his last couple of posts. He says, "That's just one example from an almost 2-hour interview full of distorted half-truths and full-on lies. You mean you were wrong, and you just decided to like pull random stuff out of your head to try and debunk what he said? If that's how factual Poilievre was in that segment, I assume he was on point in the rest of it too. I've watched it. I know." He says, "There's no real solution, just anger, unless you count his plan to cut social programs and his idea to solve the housing crisis by building homes in the Arctic, I guess." He literally never said that. He just said that we have more, like, we're a massive country, so in theory, land should be cheap. And although people are saying, well, people live close to the US border for a reason, well, what about Winnipeg? What about Edmonton? What about other northern cities in which there's a large population? And in theory, between like a place like Calgary, or let's just say like Windsor and Edmonton, there's probably a lot more space for growing smaller towns into more mid-sized cities where people can get cheap housing as starter homes. But I'll finish up here. And he says, anyways, he says, "This interview makes me sad for our country, for all of us. It's not going to achieve the things conservative voters think he will, and we're all going to suffer for it. This guy likes free drugs on the streets, and he's talking about suffering? Pathetic. The man's paid by social activist groups, probably funded by the government, to go around promoting safe supply. He's a hack. He really just doesn't like conservatives because he's probably going to get his funding cut as soon as safe supply programs are cracked down on from the federal level, because no municipality has the right to just like basically subject all of its residents to being attacked on the streets or having crime-ridden streets because they just let drugs go everywhere. It's insane." Anyways, I want to highlight one more take on this because it is quite insane just how mad people are over this interview. Here's one other gentleman who is very upset because apparently everyone, like, conservatives are just bad people or something like that, because he doesn't like them. Like, he disagrees with them, so that means they're bad. This Jay Hunter guy says, "Pierre Poilievre just went on a podcast with an openly misogynistic dip-ass Jordan Peterson, a podcast which was sponsored by an anti-abortion group. Yes, being against abortion is technically anti-abortion. What's your problem with them being pro-life?" He says, "A CPC caucus with MPs who have publicly stated they want to end abortion rights in Canada. Yes, Arnold Viersen is a great man. I like him. A guy who uses incel hashtags." Who, oh my goodness, that's such a stupid talking point. The incel hashtag thing. Yeah, in a couple of Poilievre videos, I think a staffer inserted like MGTOW as a hashtag into the video. Also, hashtags really don't help you get that many more viewers. And yeah, that was stupid. Is that really your defining criticism of Pierre Poilievre, that a staffer used the hashtag MGTOW, which stands for men going their own way, in a video description? Who cares? It doesn't mean anything. The Liberals are still losing, by the way, after all of this whining about abortion and saying that Poilievre's lying on the podcast with Peterson, because it turns out people don't care about the nitpicks. People don't care about the smears anymore. People just want a government who's going to lower the taxes, lower spending, crack down on crime, and just do sensible things on social issues. Rebuild the military, actually not attack the police, lock up criminals, radical stuff like that. Talking to an extremist like Jordan Peterson. How is he extreme? Because he supports the things that people like Pierre Poilievre want to do. Anyways, so that should be it for me today. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. I finally got this thing all set up. So guys, help me get to 100,000 subscribers. Obviously subscribe to the channel, recommend it to others, like this video, leave a comment. It really helps boost the videos in the algorithm. And I always scroll through, try and answer comments from people, or at least take it in as information to have when I do new videos. I take recommendations, I like critiques, all that sort of thing. Or if you just want to say, a compliment about the video, I will take that too. But if you also want to support the channel, you can donate to the Give, Send, Go campaign. I have linked both in the description below as well as pinned at the top of the comments. And if you haven't signed up, sign up onto my website, WyattClaypool.com. I have an email list going where I can collect data so I can reach out to people who are in local areas where there's a nomination going on, where I know a very good conservative candidate is. because if we want to get better people in government, we can't just vote for party brands. We also have to make sure the people running under those more conservative party brands are in fact the most conservative people that we can also get. So that's it for me, guys. Have a good one.